साले के बीच में डंडी नहीं है एक यार अरे
डिस्कस कर रहा है पुलिस से।
Hello, my name is Julie Snook and welcome to 9 News Watch. What you're looking at there are the scenes in India, where 1.3 billion people have been placed in lockdown. Police are using bamboo sticks and quite violently at times to punish those who should be at home. It's questionable tactics, perhaps, especially making people caught in the street do squats and push-ups. They have only 500 cases so far, but the authorities are terrified of the virus taking hold in a country with such a huge population. Let's bring you up to speed with today's developments now, and there have now been 12 deaths in Australia. Job losses continue to rise, with Flight Centre and Virgin Australia announcing redundancies, while a string of retailers closed their stores. Queensland and WA announced plans for their schools to become pupil-free. More than 3,000 Aussies are stuck on 30 cruise ships scattered around the world. Kidney dialysis operations have been halted, with many donated organs having to be thrown away. There are now distancing guidelines in place for construction sites. Meantime, the 30-minute restrictions on hairdressing appointments have been overturned. Bunnings and Dan Murphy's have announced rationing of stocks. Now to those tragic numbers, and just today, Australia has lost its 10th, 11th and 12th victims to coronavirus. All 3 casualties were Victorians and were all men aged in their 70s. There are 16 people seriously ill in New South Wales and 3 in Melbourne. New South Wales Police, who have the authority to hand out $1,000 on-the-spot fines, are planning to ramp up their presence as well. Spot checks in Victoria yesterday found 8 people not at home who were meant to be in lockdown. The majority of Australia are now restricted within their borders, and overnight there were huge queues on the New South Wales-Queensland border, where police have set up checkpoints to make sure only essential workers are getting through. We'll take a look at this now. Sydney International Airport early this morning as Australians arrive back on home soil. Social distancing certainly not being encouraged as travellers are bunched together in long lines to pass through customs. Now, when the Australian Border Force was asked why the rules were not being enforced, the response was, "Not our problem, that's biosecurity." With the majority of our cases here originating from overseas travellers, and on the back of the Ruby Princess farce, they're worrying scenes. Virgin's CEO admits more than 1,000 of the 8,000 workers stood down will probably be made redundant. As many as 230 pilots could go in the cuts. It was all too much for one flight attendant who broke down in tears during a final goodbye to passengers and colleagues as they landed in New Zealand.
On behalf of the entire Virgin Australia team, we wish you all the best during these testing times. Please take care of yourselves, your neighbours, and stay safe. It's remarkable how we've all banded together during this chaos, and I'm so proud of how you continue to hold your heads high. Remember that tough times don't last, tough people do. We're all in this together. So, on behalf of Captain Alistair Marshall, First Officer Craig Dixon, your cabin crew, Ella, Jeannie, Hannah, myself, and the entire New Zealand network, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. We truly hope to see you in the sky again soon. Kia kaha.
Such a lovely message there, and one that certainly carries right across the globe. With the UK death toll, it's now reached 463, and not even the royal family is immune from COVID-19, with Prince Charles testing positive. Europe correspondent Ben Avery has the details.
Well, Prince Charles is reportedly in good spirits, but it is a shock diagnosis for him given he is 71 years old and at that age considered vulnerable here in the UK. Now, Clarence House says he's been displaying mild symptoms but otherwise remains in good health and has been working from home throughout the last few days as usual. There are now concerns about the health of the Queen, but Buckingham Palace has assured everyone she remains in good health. It says the 93-year-old last saw her son briefly on March 12 and is now following all of the advice with regard to her welfare. Now, Charles's wife Camilla has had a test for coronavirus. It's come back negative. She does still, though, now need to go into isolation with Charles. They're doing that at Balmoral in Scotland, presumably for the next 14 days.
Spain could soon become the epicentre of the global corona crisis, with the country's death toll surpassing China's. A surge in 738 deaths in the past 24 hours brought Spain's total fatalities to nearly 3,500. In Italy, the death toll has climbed to more than 7,500. The global death toll has now surpassed 21,000. The man accused of storming into a New Zealand mosque 1 year ago and opening fire, killing 51 people, has today pleaded guilty to all charges. The Christchurch massacre sent shockwaves throughout the world, but some relief at last for the victims' families, who no longer have to prepare for a painful trial. Anna Burns-Francis has the details.
Tarrant appeared via video link at the High Court in Christchurch today. He had been facing 50 charges of murder, 40 charges of attempted murder and 1 terrorism charge. Now, the judge said that a couple of days ago his legal counsel indicated he was prepared to plead guilty to those charges, but the media and the families and the victims of those involved in the case were not allowed to know about the hearing in advance because, of course, should Brenton Tarrant have changed his mind and pleading guilty at today's hearing, then that could have affected any ongoing trial or court proceedings. So there was about an hour's warning today to everybody about a hearing that was going to take place. And Brenton Tarrant, when he heard those names being read out, then proceeded to plead guilty to all of those charges.
And you are further charged that on the 15th day of March 2019 at Christchurch, you did engage in a terrorist act. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
We have heard from some of the families this afternoon that they are pleased, they're relieved that the news that Brenton Tarrant has pleaded guilty. The judge has, for the meantime, remanded him until May the 1st for sentencing, but that's just a nominal date because, of course, we are in lockdown. So we anticipate that date will be moved forward, but today's plea, obviously meaning that 6-week trial in June, will not need to go ahead.
All right, let's lift the mood a little, and some of the biggest names and voices in the world are uniting from their own homes to put on a benefit concert, paying tribute to those on the front line during this COVID-19 pandemic. The 1 hour special will be hosted by Elton John and features the likes of Mariah Carey, Tim McGraw, Alicia Keys and even the Backstreet Boys. Now that is one concert we will all be tuning in for. Thank you so much for joining us on 9 News Watch. Of course, we will be back again tomorrow from 5:30 p.m. But before we leave you tonight, here is a little inspiration for the parents who are working from home, particularly the musical types. Now, if the soundtrack of your children's voice is getting a little bit much, try auto-tune.